Okay, hey everybody, welcome to Intro to CSS. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to use a couple different kinds of layout. You should be able to use inline layout, you should be able to use block layout. You should be able to at least be able to articulate what Flexbox and grid are kind of all about. You should understand how colors work. Sorry, did I say understand out loud? You should be able to use a couple different color models in CSS, and you should be able to use the box model. So let's write those down so we don't forget them. I'm going to say use two different display types. You should be able to use at least two color models, and you should be able to describe the box model. If you can do those three things, I would say you got a pretty damn good start on your CSS career. So let's attack this first one first, the display types. So display types have to do with how content flows in a document. So some history I think is relevant. HTML, and ergo CSS, was originally designed as a document sharing tool, like for academic papers and stuff. That's it. And so a lot of the terminology and concepts and what have you very much have that, that history sort of embedded in them. For example, we talk about document flow. So imagine that this is a web page. Document flow assumes that there are two different kinds of things. Stuff that's inline, like words in a sentence, and stuff that should take up the entire line, like headings and paragraphs. And that's it. Those are two different types. Inline and block, we call these. If I had to make a guess, I would say 80% of people's CSS woes come from misunderstanding this. Everything is some kind of box. Either the box tries to take up the entire line, or the box tries to take up as little space as possible. Those are our two different like basic display types. We've got a couple other ones that, that we'll talk briefly about. But if you get these two, you are like starting to understand CSS a little bit. As you might imagine, if you have a block element and you add another inline element, it goes right after it. If you add an inline element after an inline element, it goes right next to it. If you add a block element after an inline element, it makes its own line. Just like this. Ask me some questions about that.
So those types are always going to follow that formatting?
Yep, every single time. So the scary implication of this is that we don't control the vertical space. If I want to do something like, say I've got another page here, I want to put something over here and I want to put something over here. There's no straightforward way to do that with document flow. The tricky way to do it would be to have a big empty block element with nothing in it there. So, and then having two block elements wrapping these two things and saying, oh, this one should be aligned this way and this one should be aligned this way. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, if by document flow, do you mean like its ability to like kind of flex and adapt to the size of the page, or do you just mean like normal, like top to bottom, left to right?
Top to bottom, left to right. That's document flow. Just like if you were in Word and like you weren't so good at using the style sheet tools in Word. What would you do? You'd have a paragraph and you'd left align this one and you'd right align this one, and then you'd hit return a bunch of times. Well, when you hit return a bunch of times, you're effectively making new paragraphs. And so you'd have a whole bunch of blank block level things. And then when you get to your last one, you right align it. Historically, that's been the only way we can control the vertical axis in CSS. Now, in 2020, we got a couple of other tools that help us with that, but you use them in addition to inline and block. If you don't get inline and block, you don't know shit about CSS.
So with the new tools implemented, that's how you do like overlapping images with text and stuff like that?
Ooh, not quite. The other display modes that we have, so things like Flexbox or Grid or something, are ways to kind of override our inline and block semantics and do things like vertically center and align things. But they don't handle the overlapping part. That's a thing called positioning, which is, I'll give you a demo of that, but that's a little bit beyond the basics. Let me make a note. Other questions about inline and block?
Yeah, I actually have one more. So you created a lot of negative space to get those on the left and the bottom right.
Hmm?
Do you have to erase those and then put in something new and enough to fit in that space, or will that bottom picture like move up?
So if I deleted this block element that I have here taking up all this space, then that goes zoop, right up to here.
Okay, so it's like a puzzle.
A little bit, yeah. It's probably easiest to just think of it as like a Word doc or your text editor or something like that. The same way that like, well, I can't make something start on the right side. Like you're typing top to bottom, left to right. We can do some alignment kinds of tricks, but we can't just arbitrarily put weird shit like wherever we want on the page. It's not a canvas. That's a helpful mental model for CSS. What else? So certain HTML elements are either inline or block by default in your browser. All of them are overridable. You can make any block level element an inline element or vice versa. But the defaults are usually not a bad place to start. For example, the strong tag in HTML indicates that something should have strong emphasis. This is typically displayed with something like bold. If you wrap something in strong tags, you wouldn't expect it to start a new paragraph. Well, that's what it would do if you made it a block level element, because you'd go word, 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 word. Oh, strong. If you make that block, then it gets its own line, and then it keeps on going after that. It's probably not what you want. Probably want it to be inline. So a lot of like our text related things, marking up emphasis or strong emphasis or indicating a keyword or something like that. All of those sorts of things we expect to be inline elements. versus things like paragraphs, you would expect to be a block. A heading, you would expect that to be a block, and so it is. Again, you can override those and make those whatever you want, but those two things, they tend to go hand in hand with certain elements. And then we have two special elements, div and span. Div and span, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about semantic HTML, mean that I couldn't think of a better name. Div is a generic block level element, means you couldn't find a more specific one. Span is a generic inline element, means you couldn't find a more specific one. More questions about display types?
So would you say inlines would be like clickable links?
Yep,
Or,
absolutely. So by default, anchor tags, the A tags, are inline. Because if you have a link in the middle of a paragraph, you don't necessarily want that link to make its own new line on the page. So if it's supposed to be inline, it is the inline display mode. All right, let's get our hands dirty. Too much jibber jabber. All right, so I do not want you to follow along with this just yet. So I'm going to make an index.html and an app.css. And in here, do basic parts of my HTML page. Needs a doc type, needs a head and a body. Inside the head, we need a title. And it needs character set.
what exactly is character set?
Oh, bigger question than we really have time to answer, but my like 15-second answer would be your computer doesn't understand A, X, 7, like any of those characters. They're numbers. And those numbers map to glyphs. And so like, for example, when you type A, that number is like 32 or something like that. But when the reason it shows up as an A on the page, the reason it shows up an A on my computer and your computer is there's a character set that goes, 32 is A. And so UTF-8 is by far the most popular one because it's enormous. So many. Total number of characters allowed in UTF-8. There you go, over 1 million. And so this is the entire Roman character set, the entire Greek character set, all the Chinese characters, kanji, emoji are UTF-8 characters now, which is why like you don't have to have a plugin installed to see those. So if you look at the UTF-8 list, there you go, capital A, 41. So you hit that character on your keyboard, it sends 41 to your computer, and your computer goes, oh, cool, that's A. When a web server is doing the same thing and sending those character codes back down, this is how your browser knows how to interpret them correctly.
Oh, so that's what gives you the data keys for
Yep.
like every, okay.
Yep. And now you're getting a hint of how we convert things like binary into characters like this. Character encodings. You've probably heard of ASCII, or at least you've heard of ASCII art. ASCII is the first 255 characters of UTF-8. Cool. So, and this is all of these. This is what you need to have a valid HTML document. Can't leave the character set off. Your browser will figure out what you mean, but it's technically not a valid document. Okay, so we'll say CSS practice. And then we're going to make this is a paragraph. This is commonly represented as italic, while this is commonly represented as bold. This is another paragraph. Oops. This is some span. All right, and now let's link in a style sheet. Let's sanity check ourselves on this style sheet. We can say something like body background color red. And we serve it up. Hey, cool, it worked. So what I want you to do now is I want you to go into a folder, new folder, use your terminal. I will know if you use the graphic interface on your operating system. Open up a terminal, navigate somewhere, make a new folder, mkdir, cd into it, make a blank index.html page, make a blank app.css file, and I'm going to give you the code for this. I'm going to put it in the Slack thread for this meeting invite. Here's the HTML. By the way, those triple backticks, that's how you make this stuff show up formatted like that. Now you know, I don't want to see you sending me this plain text shit like that. Womp womp. No, thank you. I want you to make sure you wrap that stuff in triple ticks. All right, so there's your starter code for your index.html and your app.css. If you have not done so already, you're going to need light server installed, which you can do with npm install -g light-server. You can, and then from the root of that folder, the light-server command will serve up your app. Like so. So I want you to get that far, and then I want you to, well, get that far first. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Go.
Is anybody else not having any luck with that light server command?
npm install -g.
Yeah, I just copied and pasted that in, and it did not work in my terminal.
That would imply that you did not install npm on the first day of school. So if that describes you,
Is there a way to check that by doing like an npm command?
yeah, which npm, like which one is it? Well, if that comes back with anything, you have it. If it doesn't, not so much.
That's really weird.
You are also having npm woes. I would take a look at this section of the first day computer setup.
Yeah, that's weird. I thought I had all that stuff, yet somehow that one is escaping me.
Kyle, I have a question.
Yep.
When you're setting up your HTML structure, is it general convention to have a language tag in there?
It's not required, but let's say it's pretty common.
Okay. I know it's an accessibility thing. A screen reader will recognize that.
I'm pretty sure, God, that's a good question. Let me see if they changed that. HTML lang attribute. Oh my God, why am I looking at W3 schools? I'm a grown up. All right. Ooh, that's not what I thought. The default value of lang is unknown. Oh, that's kind of neat. You can use it on paragraphs and stuff too.
Kyle, is that supposed to be NVM? Because it says NPM in your Slack.
Two different things. So NVM is your Node version manager that installs Node for you. NPM comes with Node. So if you've installed Node, you have it. And then you can use it to install tools like that.
Yeah, because it says it's already installed.
NPM is already installed?
Yeah, I followed the link that you posted and I copied and pasted and it said NVM is already installed in users.myname.nvm.
All right, that's good. So what happens if you do NVM install node?
I don't know if it matters that I did it in the folder that I was doing HTML CSS practice in, but it said downloading and installing Node version 14.8.
Hey, that's a good sign. I'll bet after that, if you run that npm command again, you're good to go.
Hey, Kyle.
Yes.
I've had to run this curl command for installing NVM like constantly. Like I'll run the curl command, exit out of my terminal and run command V NVM. And it says it returns the correct response, NVM. But then like I'll exit out of my terminal again and run command V NVM and it will be blank. Like it doesn't like stick to the system.
So your issue is that for whatever reason, this didn't make it to your RC files. So what you can do is you can take that, actually not the curl command, just the export command will be fine. You take the second part of that, so this export command, and you open up in your home folder .zishrc, and you'll get all this stuff that ohmyzish gave you, and then poop it down at the bottom.
Okay.
That'll run that every single time you open your terminal.
Cool.
All right, so let's talk about how we play with that thing that we just made. All right, so I'm running live server over here. Mine
isn't showing up with the HTML. There's probably something easy I'm missing.
So Sydney, what does the file have to be called?
The HTML has to be index.html and the app or the CSS has to be app.css. It will not work if you don't, unless you what I said. I haven't tried that yet.
I didn't save. That was my problem. I'm sorry.
And then you have to be in the correct folder. Those are the two gotchas that come up the most. Index.html means slash. If you don't ask for anything, that's what it's expecting it to be. It can be other things. You just have to specifically ask for it then. So I can make a copy of that called fart.html. So now I've got two of those things. And if I look for fart.html, hey, what do you know? Same page. But if you don't specify anything, it's expecting a file called index.html. Cool. Let's talk about how to play with this. So let's say, all right, so I've got, let's look at those divs, or the div down at the bottom. So it says, this is some span. This looks the way that it does because span is an inline element. And so this is trying to take up, the div takes up the whole line. Inside of it is this span. And so it looks the way that it does. I can also try to make that span a block level element with display block. And now it goes on its own line. Ta-da! So if you want to play around with this, and I want you to take, target some of these tags, play with their display types. See what happens if you make them something other than what they are right now. You can target them just like this. You make whatever the name of the tag is, H1, open up some curlies, display, colon, inline. Anybody know why that didn't go on the same line as this is a paragraph?
Because the block takes up the entire line. So you can't put it in line and then push the block to the side.
Yeah, because the P is still a block. There we go. So let's take a couple of minutes, just play around with it. See what happens when you change stuff. Go.
Is there an easy way to get my page loadout to look like yours with like code editor on the left and the page on the right?
On Mac, no. There's a, you have to do it as a plugin, which as a Linux snob, this is like one of the things I get the Linux snobbiest about is like, wait, so I have to add a plugin to my window manager to manage my windows? Fuck you. But the most common one that I think people like on Mac is Moom. See, it's $10, but it's pretty good. The free one that a lot of people use on Mac is called Spectacle. And it'll give you like, so it's in the demo. Allows you to move the windows around and stuff like that.
Thanks.
EJ, I tile mine. I don't know if that does what you're looking for.
How's that work?
If you hover over your little green circle, it'll have some options show up and you can choose tile and it'll just split your screen into like 2 screens and you can choose which windows you want.
I'm still having issues getting Light Server to even pull up.
Oh no! What are your Light Server woes?
I downloaded it, or I mean installed it, and then it says I try to just type Light Server, and it just says this command not found.
Are you doing Light Dash Server?
Yeah.
Did you install it globally? So that's with the -G.
I thought I did. Let me try it one more time.
Okay.
I think it's just having issues with the NPM, which is weird because I checked it and it says I have one, but I guess it's not. There's something up with it.
So that means that you have Light Server installed. Which NPM means you have NPM installed. If nothing comes back, it means you don't. Should also be able to do which node. Do command -v nvm. That should come back with the word nvm. If it doesn't, you don't have nvm installed. And if you're like, but I installed nvm, I had this once upon a time, then you have the same problem as Elliot. And for whatever reason, that command did not make it into your zshrc. It does it automatically. And if you do the steps in order on the computer setup page, that should have worked for you. But if it didn't, then you can throw that little export command at the bottom of this one right here. You throw that at the bottom of your .zshrc file.
All right, let me try that.
Cool. Any questions come up while you were playing with that stuff?
Can you go more into depth about how span works?
Yep. Span is exactly like our strong and our EM tags, except those have a meaning to them that's defined by the spec. So this is saying, all right, text that should have some emphasis should be wrapped in EM tags. Stuff that has strong emphasis should be wrapped in strong tags. Now note that that's different from how they're visually displayed. It doesn't mean italic and bold. Those are typically shown that way, but it has more to do with the meaning of how it's used than how it's visually represented. For example, something that might be in italics in American English might be in those like little tiny angle brackets in Spanish. So the presentation of something like that is separate from what it means. And there's a whole bunch of those inline semantic tags that you can tap into. If one of them doesn't work for you, then that's what span is for.
So I tried to use it on a word that's in the middle of the sentence,
Uh-huh.
and it was printing weird onto the website. Like it had the word span in there. Is it usable? And like I tried to do it on commonly, like this is commonly.
Sure. So my guess is that you didn't close the tag. So if I do span, close span, now I have my span set to block right now. If I do that, unspecial.
And can you, like how you can do H1, can you do span one? Like can you make separate ones? No. Okay.
Headings, which are like the H1s, there's 6 of them. It's the only element that's like that. H1 is like for a primary heading. H2 is a secondary heading, tertiary heading, and so on. Again, think of the like academic research paper history of this stuff. That's how you outline a document, is with your headings.
Why didn't commonly change in yours?
Why would it?
In mine, it created another, it took the commonly word and put it in another line. Just like it can. Just like
is your CSS changing it to display block?
Oh. Yeah.
You could also say color red.
Very cool.
Other questions about this?
I don't know if this is appropriate for right now, but can you kind of explain the difference between like EM versus pixels
Sure.
as far as sizing?
Mm-hmm. So a couple different size values in CSS. Size units. So the way that a size unit in CSS works, you got a couple of them. There's pixels, that's how many dots on the screen. You've got percentages, so that is a percent of the of your parent element. So like this H1, its parent is the page. So it's, if I say that it's 50%, that's going to be 50% of the width of the page. Or if I'm in something that's 50%, and I do 50% again, well, it's going to be 25% of the page, 50% of the thing that I'm inside. So that's percentages. M's, this one actually comes from like typography, print typography. So an M is width of the capital letter M in the current font. So in basically every typeface, a capital M is the widest character. And since design isn't art, it's not something that people do with paintbrushes and berets, it's a logically derived thing. It's exactly like programming is problem solving. Like design is the same kind of problem solving. It just uses a visual language instead of computer language. So when you're trying to figure out how much padding or margin or whatever something should have, a lot of the time that's based off of whatever font you're currently using. And what's the size of the font determined by? Well, how big is the screen? How far is the person's eye from the screen? Like general readability guidelines, you're looking for like 7 to 10 words on a line. So M ends up coming in pretty handy for things like that. There's one called rem. A rem is just like an M, except it's not relative to the current type size. It's relative to the global type size, whatever the body's type size is. Let's see. If you've ever done any like print design before, you can do insane shit like points and I want to say picas is like that. Don't use those. There's no good reason for it. These are the ones you probably see the most. There's various uses for each of them.
So when it comes to like the M's and the pixels,
Yeah.
will they like not adapt to the size of the page the same way like percentage will?
Correct. Now, so you might be thinking, oh, I'll just do everything in percents, or like that's what responsive design is all about. It's actually not true. The problem with that is that it stays linear the entire time, and as you zoom in on something, not everything gets big at the same rate. And so using like a formal scale ends up working a lot better than going off of percentages. Another thing is that like if you're doing something like typography, some typefaces are variable size. Most of them aren't. Like it's a different set of glyphs for like different sizes of a lot of typefaces. So like the legibility of a character, especially one like F or something, like they design it differently at different sizes. And so you want to like pick a specific size of a typeface. you can't vary it, or otherwise you end up with like weird subpixel shit and your stuff just ends up coming out fuzzy. So percents have a place, but they're not like how you do responsive design or anything like that. Good question. Cool. So like I kind of want to punt the color thing just a little bit. I'll show you like what I was going to talk about. There's two common ways you see colors represented. One of them, which you've probably seen already, is with hex. So hex is this confusing fucking style where you have 3 sets of these characters, and they represent the amount of red, the amount of green, and the amount of blue. So the numbers go from 0 to F. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. Yeah. And then like this is, it's just like tens place, hundreds place kind of stuff with regular numbers, except there's 16 values in each position. So we've got 3 sets of that. If you're doing something like this, you can also just use 3 and it'll do the same thing. This is, it's the oldest color system in CSS. It's the most widely supported. It also sucks because like you cannot do color math in your head with it. I've never met somebody who can like look at a hex code and understand it. So there's a much better system called HSL, which you'll see me use a lot. HSL is hue, saturation, light. It's the exact same colors. There's any color you can make with HSL, you can also make with hex and vice versa. It's a different way of understanding the color. So the way it works is hue is like what you would call the color. 0 is red, 360 is red. The rest of it goes in a circle. So think red, green, blue, RGB. Red is 0, green is 120, blue is 240, and then 360 is back to 0. So if I wanted something like purple, all right, well, it's a little bit more red, so it's to the red side of blue. So if I do 240, then I end up with like a blue. If I want to make it more purple, I can just inch that towards 360. See, it's starting to get purpley now. It's even more purpley. And at some point, it becomes like magenta and starts getting just a little bit closer to red. And now we're probably more red than purple. And then we get to 360. Now we're just pure red. So a lot easier to like get a target color in your head with HSL. Saturation, 100% is like Barney the Dinosaur, Ronald McDonald, like just intense. So if I do a fully saturated red, if I do 0, it's just black and white. So it's just grayscale kind of stuff. If I do like a 20%, that's going to be a pastel red. So you can control the intensity of it with the saturation. And then lightness is how much white, how much black. So if I go 100%, it's just white. If I go 0%, it's just black. If I want a really dark red, like a brown basically, then I can probably a little bit more. And then if I kick up the saturation on that, there we go, we got brown. So like, that's a way easier color system to work with in your head. And also anybody who like digs into color theory, you can do things like complements and stuff, again, in your head. If you're trying to do a triad, well, we're just chopping a circle into 3 parts. And so I really, HSL is my go-to for basically everything. There's also one called HSLA, which will let you do transparency also. So if you wanted to have it half see-through, you can do that.
Is there another system that goes by like the 0 to 255 scale?
Yep,
For like
that's
RGB.
RGB is just like a hex code, except with decimal numbers instead of hex numbers.
Can you make like gradients for backgrounds, or is that a mess?
You totally can. So we could say body, background, color, linear gradient, and say HSL. Let's go from red to blue. So I'll say red and blue. Oops, probably got the gradient syntax wrong. Linear gradient. No, I did that right. Oh, it might be background. Is it background color? There we go. Background size cover. No. Background size. No repeat. That should do it. Weird. No repeat. So to debug that, I can element inspect it and see if the element inspector is yelling at me, which might be. So I go to body. Invalid property value. Does it need to be in quotes? Okay, that's why. Well,
Does it need both the size and the repeat? Oh wait, no, you already have that.
yeah. Why would that be an invalid property value? Okay, so I can get rid of it and see what it lets me do. Oh, weird. It's background repeat, no repeat. Background repeat, no repeat. There we go. And then, I know why. I gotta set the height of the body to the whole thing. There we go. Gradients. You can do them.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do that. I have some ideas that I want to try on the website builder.
Cool. All right, one more thing. We didn't get to play a whole ton with colors, but I'll talk very briefly about the box model. I'll let you go. So the box model has to do with our block elements. It's not just this block all by itself. There's blocks within the block. They look like this. You have the actual content. That's one layer of it. And you have this area outside the content that we call the padding. And you have this area outside of the padding. It's not always there. But if it is, that's the border. And you have this area outside the border called the margin. Every block level element, you can control all of these things. I will show you. So if I pick some block level element on this page, like this div. So I'm going to take that div, I'm going to draw a border around it. And I'm going to make a gray border. So it's going to be, doesn't matter what the color is. Doesn't matter how saturated it is. All we do is the black and white. All right, so I've got this border. I can put padding inside of that. And we can see that it goes inside the border. So this is the content, that's the border, the thing in between them is the padding. And then we can put some margin around that. And so the stuff outside of the margin, or outside of the border, is margin. Margin, padding, content. Where probably the easiest way to understand whether something should be margin or padding is in a just world, how far out would the background color for this thing go? Even if you don't have a background color, if you did, would it have the background color or not? So if I make some background color there, it stays inside of the border, covers the padding and the content, doesn't cover the margin. Margin pushes it away from another element. Padding is within the element itself. And you can see what box model properties are being applied by something if you element inspect it. In your dev tools, there's probably a thing called layout. And this shows exactly what we're doing with the box model. That's the content, that's the padding, that's the border, that's the margin. Cool. What questions do you have?
This is probably a little bit more on the advanced side, but can you make those borders like a custom design or a pattern, or is it all like solid?
That's a good question. Border images, I think, are supported in everything but Safari, which get used to hearing that. Your best resource is Can I Use? So border image. CSS3 border images. Damn, pretty good support across the board. Even old IE11. God, what was there was some border thing that I was just reading about last week, Safari not supporting. Border. There was some border thing that Safari didn't support. Safari is the last browser to support everything. It is the new Internet Explorer. It fucking blows. I hate it so much. Because like all the other browsers are like more or less standardized at this point, which is greatly helped by the fact that all of them except Firefox are Chrome under the hood at this point. Chrome and Safari. There's only 3 real browsers. Like all the rest of them are just variants on Chrome.
Would that also tell you, well, no, not quite. What methods do you use to make your website visually pleasing on every like screen size, every type? Maybe past browsers, but like if you have like a background image, it's not gonna like have a bunch of white space around it.
So some of that is just like practice. There's no like property or button or anything you hit on that. Because all of these things have some use. And a lot of, especially like the weirder ones, like, oh, well, my image looks all distorted. Well, sometimes distorting those images is like how you're actually achieving the thing you want. I'll give you a good example. So you go to my website, you scroll down, it's an explosion. These like comic book looking things, that's hacky CSS stuff. So if I element inspect it, check this out. And I go to those little pointers, check out what they are. It's a skewed polygon. It's like a little parallelogram that I skewed and like did a transparent border on, and it makes that little point.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, so like just about everything has some use to it, in the right circumstances.
So basically, bullshit it until it looks good.
Yes, there you go. Mobile doesn't do pretty good. Luckily, not a whole lot of people like will look at it on desktop and then turn their desktop into a phone. It doesn't work super good for that, but yeah, it works pretty good responsively too. Other questions? Cool. Have a good lunch.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll probably hit you up with more CSS weird questions.
Please do. Cheers.